I woke with my mother's jade hairpin digging into my palm and the sound of my own screaming still echoing in my ears. I had been dead. I knew it with a certainty that sat like ice in my stomach, the cold alley, the rotten cabbage smell, the boot that crushed my ribs one last time. I had been 32 and worthless, and now I was 14 again, trembling on a bed I had not slept in for 18 years. The door slid open before I could breathe. Lu Yenshu stepped in, his beard neatly trimmed, his robes embroidered with silver thread, exactly as I remembered. He carried the lacquered box. The same box. The same smile. He was early this time. In my first life, he had waited a full week before asking, letting me mourn my mother in peace before he struck. But now he stood in my doorway, and his eyes gleamed with the same greedy hunger that had stripped me of everything. Yuner, he said, and my childhood name on his tongue made my stomach turn. I have a small matter to discuss. I gripped the jade pin until my knuckles went white. The memory of his denial crashed over me, his puzzled frown, his smooth voice saying, "What money your mother's dowry was spent on your upbringing. You owe me." I remembered the clan nodding along, the merchants refusing my pleas, the petty merchant who bought me for a bag of rice and beat me when I bled. I remembered dying with nothing but hunger and rage. I forced my lips into a smile. I made my eyes wide and wet. I had learned, in 32 bitter years, how to look like Pray. Uncle, I said, my voice a fragile whisper. I dreamed of Mother last night. His smile flickered. Good. She stood at the foot of my bed, I continued, letting a tear slip down my cheek. She said you would come for the dowry. She said you would promise to return it. Lu Yenshu chuckled, a warm, avuncular sound that made my skin crawl. Your mother was a wise woman. She knew I would take care of you. She also said, I said, dropping my gaze to the pin in my hand, that you would forget. His laugh died. The lacquered box in his hands seemed to weigh more. Forget? Nonsense. I am a man of my word. I will rebuild the Lu mansion, and when it stands tall, you will have a home worthy of your mother's name. I looked up, letting my chin tremble. Then sign a contract. His face went slack. A contract? Mother's spirit is restless, I said, my voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. She wants to see it in writing. She wants your seal on parchment. If you sign, I will give you everything tomorrow. Every coin. Every deed. I swear it. He stared at me, and I watched the calculation behind his eyes. I knew what he was thinking. She is just a child. A grieving, foolish child. Sign the paper, take the gold, lose the paper, deny everything. What can she do? He did not know I had already seen the magistrate's wife at the tea house yesterday, slipping a note into her sleeve. I had not known her in my first life, not really, but I remembered the scandal she had caused 3 years from now, when she exposed her own husband's corruption. I remembered her fury at injustice, her hunger for a cause. This time, I had fed her a story, a poor orphan niece, a greedy uncle, a betrayal in the making. She had promised to watch. Fine, Lu Yenshu said, and his smile returned, oily and false. If it will set your mother's spirit at ease. Bring me the paper. I rose from the bed, my bare feet silent on the floor. I walked to my writing desk and pulled out a blank sheet. My hand trembled as I dipped the brush in ink, or maybe that was my rage, barely contained. I wrote slowly, deliberately, listing every piece of my mother's legacy, 50 taels of gold, 3 silk shops on the eastern road, the jade mine in the southern hills. Repayable within 5 years. With interest. I added a clause that I had not had in my first life. Failure to repay would forfeit his newly rebuilt mansion and all lands attached. He scanned the paper. His jaw tightened. Interest? Yuner, this is not how family treats family. Mother was very specific, I said, clutching the jade pin to my chest. She said if you truly meant to return it, you would not fear the interest. She said it would prove your heart was pure. He could not argue with a dead woman. He could not refuse without looking like a thief. He took the brush, dipped it in my ink, and pressed his seal beside his name. I watched the red imprint sink into the paper, and something dark and fierce bloomed in my chest. I called the clerk from the Western Market, a man I remembered as honest and poor, who had witnessed my uncle's crimes in my first life, but had been too afraid to speak. This time, I had paid him 3 silver coins and promised him a job at my silk shop once it was mine again. He stood in the corner, his pen ready, and signed his name below my uncle's. Lu Yenshu took the contract, rolled it up, and tucked it into his sleeve. "Tomorrow," he said, "bring the gold and the deeds to the construction site. I will have the foundation blessed." He left. I stood in the middle of my chamber, shaking from head to toe. I had done it. I had the paper. But I had always known, that a contract meant nothing if no one enforced it. My uncle had signed it, but he was a powerful man with powerful friends. The magistrate's wife was my ally, but the magistrate himself was a coward. I needed more. I needed a weapon he could not bribe or bully. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the second note I had written earlier, the one I had not shown the magistrate's wife. This one was addressed to the head of the merchant guild, a man my uncle had cheated 10 years ago, when he had taken a shipment of silk and paid with counterfeit silver. The merchant had lost his shop and died in debt. His son, now a young man with a grudge, had become the guild's accountant. I had met him in my first life, briefly, when I begged for work after my husband threw me out. He had given me a handful of copper coins and told me to run far away from Lu Yenshu. I had not run far enough. But this time, I would give him justice. I sent my maid to deliver the note. I sat back on my bed, the jade pin still burning in my palm. I closed my eyes, and I saw my mother's face, not the ghost from my dream, but the real one, pale and gaunt on her deathbed, pressing the pin into my hand and whispering, "Use this to buy yourself a second chance." I had thought she meant the dowry. I had thought she meant the gold. But now I understood. She meant the sharpness of my mind, the steel in my spine, the fury that had kept me breathing through 18 years of hell. The next morning, I walked to the construction site. Lu Yenshu's new mansion was already rising, crimson pillars, glazed tiles, carved dragons on the eaves. The workers swarmed like ants, and my uncle stood at the center, directing them with a flourish. He saw me coming and smiled. "Yuner, you brought the gold." I opened my silk pouch and pulled out the contract. I held it high, so the workers could see the red seal. "I brought the contract," I said, my voice ringing clear. "The one you signed. The one that says you owe me 50 taels, 3 shops, and a jade mine. Repayable within 5 years. With interest." He laughed, but it was strained. "Put that away, niece. We have witnesses here." "Good," I said, and I turned to the workers. "Do any of you know a man named Chinwei?" A young man stepped forward. His face was gaunt, his hands calloused, his eyes burning. "I am Chinwei," he said. "My father died because Lu Yenshu paid him in counterfeit silver." My uncle's face went pale. "This is nonsense." I pulled out the second paper I had prepared, the one listing every debt my uncle had ever incurred, the unpaid wages, the stolen silk, the forged coins. I had spent the whole night writing it from memory, every detail I had gathered over 18 years of watching him destroy others. I had sent copies to every merchant he had ever cheated. They were gathering in the square behind me, 40 men and women with angry faces and clenched fists. I turned to my uncle and smiled. "I did not just bring the contract, uncle. I brought the reckoning." He lunged at me. I stepped back, and the magistrate's wife walked through the crowd, flanked by 2 bailiffs. She held a third copy of the contract, the one I had slipped into her sleeve yesterday. "Lu Yenshu," she said, her voice like the crack of a whip. "Forgery? Fraud? Or do you deny your seal on this paper?" He stared at her, then at the crowd, then at me. His eyes were wild, desperate. He opened his mouth to deny it, but the clerk from the Western Market stepped forward and said, "I witnessed it. His seal. His name. His debt." The workers began to shout. The merchants began to waive their own claims. The bailiffs moved forward, and my uncle backed away, his heel catching on a loose plank. He fell backward into the foundation trench, landing in the mud with a wet thud. I walked to the edge of the trench and looked down at him. He was still wearing his silver-threaded robes, now splattered with dirt and filth. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "You will repay every coin," I said. "Every single coin you stole from my mother." Every wage you withheld. Every life you shattered. I will count them myself, one by one, until you have nothing left. He spat at me. You are a viper. Ungrateful, scheming, I am alive, I said, and I tucked the jade pin back into my hair. That is more than you will be when the guild is done with you. I turned away. The bailiffs hauled him out of the trench and dragged him toward the yamen. The crowd followed, shouting for justice. The magistrate's wife walked beside me, her hand on my arm. You have started something dangerous, she murmured. He has powerful allies. And I have powerful evidence, I said. And a crowd of witnesses. And the merchant guild on my side. Let him try to break me now. She smiled, sharp and approving. You are not the girl I met at the tea house. I was never that girl, I said. I only played her. The sun rose over the half-built mansion, and I watched my uncle's crimson pillars gleam in the morning light. They would be auctioned by nightfall. The glazed tiles would be smashed and sold for scrap. The carved dragons would be burned to keep the poor warm in winter. And I would be there, counting every coin, making sure not a single copper escaped my ledger. But as I walked away from the trench, a cold thought slithered into my mind. Liu Yenshu had signed the contract. He had been dragged to the yamen. The crowd was on my side. So why did I feel like I had only just begun to fight? I glanced back over my shoulder. The construction site was empty now, the workers gone to join the mob. But on the foundation stone, where my uncle had fallen, there was a small mark, a symbol I had never seen before, carved deep into the rock. It looked like a coiled serpent, its tail wrapped around a coin. I had not put it there. The workers had not put it there. And in my first life, it had not been there at all. I felt the jade pin grow cold against my scalp. I had won the first battle. But someone else was watching. Someone who had seen me manipulate a magistrate's wife, incite a mob, and destroy my uncle with nothing but ink and memory. Someone who had carved that serpent into the stone while I was not looking. I pulled my mother's pin out of my hair and held it up to the light. It glinted red, like blood, like fire, like the warning I had not asked for but now could not ignore. The second reckoning was coming. I just did not know who was bringing it. The coiled serpent on the foundation stone burned into my memory as I walked away. I told myself it was nothing, a worker's idle carving, a child's mischief, the light playing tricks on wet stone. But I had not survived 18 years of hell by ignoring the cold prickle at the back of my neck. I tucked my mother's jade pin deeper into my hair and made a silent promise. I would find out who left that mark, and I would make sure they understood I was not prey. The trial took 3 days. Liu Yenshu sat in the defendant's cage, his silver-threaded robes now rags, his beard matted with dried mud. He had tried to bribe the magistrate. He had tried to threaten the witnesses. He had even tried to claim that I had drugged him into signing the contract, a desperate lie that collapsed when the clerk produced his own written account of the signing. The magistrate's wife sat beside her husband, her fan flicking open and shut with barely concealed satisfaction. When the verdict came, Liu Yenshu's face went gray. He was ordered to repay every coin of my mother's dowry, plus interest, plus all outstanding wages and debts to the merchants who had gathered in the square. The mansion was seized as collateral. The construction site was frozen. The crimson pillars would be auctioned in 7 days, along with the glazed tiles and the carved dragons. I stood in the courtroom, my hands folded neatly in my sleeves, and I felt nothing but cold certainty. The jade pin was warm against my scalp now, as if my mother's spirit approved. But the serpent mark haunted me. That night, I returned to the construction site alone. The moon was a sliver in the sky, casting just enough light to see the foundation stone where my uncle had fallen. The coiled serpent was still there, sharp and deliberate, its tail wrapped around a coin that had a hole in its center, a detail I had missed in the daylight. I knelt down and traced the carving with my finger. The lines were deep, professional, made with a tool that had not been a worker's chisel. I had seen this symbol before, in my first life, on the wall of a debtor's prison. It was the mark of the Golden Serpent Society, a shadowy network of moneylenders and information brokers who operated beyond the reach of the law. They loaned gold at ruinous interest, and when borrowers could not pay, they took more than gold. They took secrets, loyalties, lives. My uncle had been a small fish, a petty fraudster. The Golden Serpent Society would have had no reason to mark his foundation stone. Unless they had marked it for someone else. Unless they had marked it for me. I stood up quickly, my heart hammering. The construction site was silent, but the silence felt heavy, watchful. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached the gates of my mother's former silk shop, the one I had reclaimed that very morning. The shop was dark, but I had a key, and I let myself inside. I lit a single oil lamp and sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to remember everything I knew about the Golden Serpent Society. In my first life, I had heard whispers. They had a leader called the Serpent's Head, a woman who had risen from nothing and now controlled half the loans in the southern prefecture. She was ruthless, precise, and she had a particular hatred for men who cheated widows and orphans. I had never met her. I had never even seen her face. But I remembered a story, a merchant who had tried to steal an orphan's inheritance, only to wake up one morning with all his accounts drained and a serpent carved into his front door. I had carved a serpent into my uncle's foundation stone, in a way. Not with a tool, but with a paper and ink. I had done exactly what the society did, exposed a fraud, reclaimed a debt, destroyed a man with evidence and witnesses. I was either their ally or their target. The oil lamp flickered, and I heard a soft knock at the shop door. 3 knocks, then a pause, then 2 more. I had not told anyone where I was going. I had not left a note. I gripped my mother's jade pin and rose to my feet, my knees shaking. "Who's there?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. The door swung open. A woman stood on the threshold, her face half hidden by a dark veil. She was tall, slender, and she carried a lacquered box identical to the one my uncle had brought to my bedchamber. But this box was black, not red, and on its lid was the coiled serpent, gold against ebony. "Lu Yun," she said, and her voice was low, calm, almost melodic. "You have made quite a noise." I did not run. Running would have been useless. She had found me in a locked shop at midnight. She could find me anywhere. I set my jaw and met her gaze through the veil. "Who are you?" "I am the one who left the mark on your uncle's foundation stone," she said. "I wanted to see what you would do with the warning. You did not run. You did not hide. You went back to the stone and traced the carving with your finger." She had been watching. She had been watching me all along. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you warn me?" She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The oil lamp cast her shadow long across the floor, a serpent's shape that writhed and curled. "Because I have been watching Lu Yanchi for 3 years. He owes the society a great deal of gold he borrowed to build that mansion. He promised to repay us when the construction was finished. But he had no intention of repaying anyone. He planned to sell the mansion to a northern lord and disappear." I felt the pieces click into place. My uncle had not just defrauded me. He had defrauded the Golden Serpent Society. And they had been waiting for the right moment to strike. "You used me," I said slowly. "You knew I would confront him. You knew I would bring the merchants and the magistrate's wife. You used my revenge to destroy him." The woman laughed, a soft, silvery sound. "I did not use you, Lu Yun. I simply made sure you had the tools you needed. The contract. The witnesses. The crowd. I placed the serpent on the stone to see if you would flinch. You did not. You are not prey." I should have been furious. I should have felt manipulated, used, discarded. But instead, I felt something else, a strange, electric kinship. She had done exactly what I would have done. She had set the board, moved the pieces, and watched the game unfold. "You want something from me," I said. "I want to offer you a partnership," she said. "The society is growing. We have moneylenders, spies, enforcers. But we have too few women who understand the game from the inside, women who know what it is to be cheated, beaten, left to die in an alley. You have that knowledge, Lu Yun. You have the rage. And you have the contract." I touched the paper in my sleeve. It was still there, warm and worn. "The contract is mine. I am not sharing it." "I do not want your contract," she said. "I want your mind. Your memory. Your ability to see 3 moves ahead. You are 14 years old, but you think like a woman twice your age. And you carry the weight of a woman who has already died once." My blood ran cold. No one knew that. No one could have known that. I had told no one, not the magistrate's wife, not the merchants, not the clerk. The serpent woman was looking at me through her veil, and I felt like she could see straight through my skin. "Did my uncle tell you?" I whispered. "Your uncle does not know anything," she said. "He is a fool. But I have read your mother's jade pin. It is not just a pin, Lu Yun. It is a key to the mine, yes, but also a key to something older. Your mother was not just a merchant's wife. She was one of us before she married." I stared at her. My mother had never told me. She had always been quiet about her past, only saying that she came from the South, that she had chosen love over fortune. I had never questioned it. I had never needed to. "She was a member of the Golden Serpent Society," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She was the serpent's head before me," the woman said. "She retired when she married your father. She hid the jade pin in her hair, and she never looked back. But she kept the contracts, Lu Yun. She kept the records. And now you have them." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words would not come. The jade pin was burning against my scalp now, and I remembered my mother's dying words, "Use this to buy yourself a second chance." I had thought she meant the dowry. I had thought she meant the gold. But she had meant the society. She had meant the power that came with the pin. "Your uncle's debts are ours," the serpent woman continued. "The mansion, the tiles, the pillars, all of it will be auctioned, and the proceeds will go to you, as the contract dictates. But the land beneath the mansion, Lu Yun, that land is not his. It was your mother's. She bought it before she married, and she hid the deed in the jade mine. Lu Yanshu built his mansion on stolen ground." I felt the pieces of a much larger puzzle sliding into place. My uncle had not just stolen my dowry. He had stolen my mother's land, her legacy, her hidden power. And now he was sitting in a debtor's cage, unaware that the ground beneath him had never been his to build on. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Claim the land," she said. "Take the mine. Take the shops. Take everything your mother left you, and then come find me. I will be waiting at the Golden Serpent Pavilion, at the corner of the Eastern Road and the Silk Market. Ask for the Veiled Woman." She turned and walked toward the door. I called after her, "Wait. Why are you helping me? What do you get out of this?" She paused at the threshold, her veil fluttering in the night breeze. "I get a partner," she said. "I get someone who will not flinch when the world tries to bury her. And I get to see Lu Yanshi rot in the cage he built for himself. That is enough." She stepped out into the night. I ran to the door, but she was gone, vanished like smoke, like a serpent sliding into grass. The street was empty. The moon was still a sliver. The oil lamp flickered behind me, casting my shadow long and thin. I closed the door and slid the bolt shut. I leaned against the wood, my heart pounding, my hand pressed to the jade pin in my hair. My mother had been a serpent head. She had hidden contracts, deeds, land. She had given me the pin on her deathbed, not just as a keepsake, but as a key. And I had used it to destroy my uncle, thinking I had won the only battle I needed. But there were more battles ahead. There were debts to collect, land to reclaim, a society to rebuild. And somewhere out there, Lu Yanshu was sitting in his cage, still breathing, still scheming. I had taken his mansion. I had taken his freedom. But I had not taken his voice. And if the Golden Serpent Society knew about my mother, then someone else might know too. Someone who would come looking for the deeds, the contracts, the land that lay beneath my uncle's ruined pillars. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the contract. I read it again, line by line, searching for any mention of the land. There was none. My uncle had been too stupid to know what he was building on. But the Veiled Woman knew. And now I knew. I folded the contract and tucked it into my mother's old chest, alongside the jade pin. I would not sleep tonight. I had too much to think about, too many questions, too many ghosts. But when morning came, I would walk to the Golden Serpent Pavilion. I would ask for the Veiled Woman. And I would find out exactly what my mother had left me, and exactly what I had inherited. The oil lamp burned low. The shop was silent. But I could still hear the serpent woman's voice in my head, soft and sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. I was not just Lu Yun, the orphan niece. I was the serpent's daughter. And the reckoning was only beginning. I walked to the Golden Serpent Pavilion at dawn, my mother's jade pin tucked securely into my hair, and the contract folded in my sleeve. The Eastern Road was empty, The silk shops still shuttered, the street sweepers not yet out with their brooms. I had not slept. I had spent the night turning over every word the veiled woman had spoken, every glance she had cast through her dark veil. My mother had been a serpent head. She had hidden deeds in the jade mine. She had bought the land beneath my uncle's mansion and never told a soul. The pavilion was a modest building, 3 stories tall, its eaves painted in faded gold. A wooden serpent coiled around the main pillar, its eyes inlaid with chips of jade that caught the morning light. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dark, lit only by a few oil lamps that cast long shadows across the floor. A woman sat behind a low desk, her face hidden by the same dark veil. She did not look up as I entered. She simply gestured to the cushion across from her. Sit, she said. You came. I knew you would. I sat. My knees were trembling, but I kept my hands steady on my lap. Tell me everything. About my mother. About the society. About the land. The veiled woman reached beneath the desk and pulled out a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed and cracked. She opened it to a marked page and slid it toward me. I leaned forward and read. The script was my mother's. I recognized the slant of her characters, the way she looped her strokes, the tiny flourishes she added to the ends of her lines. She had kept meticulous records, every loan she had made, every debtor she had cornered, every contract she had sealed. And at the bottom of the page, written in red ink, was a note: "The land beneath the Liu mansion is mine. Bought in secret, recorded in the mine's vault. If I die, give the key to my daughter." I looked up, my throat tight. She wrote this. 3 months before she died, the veiled woman said. She knew she was ill. She knew your uncle would come for the dowry. She tried to prepare you, but she did not have time to explain everything. She gave you the pin and hoped you would find your way. I touched the jade pin in my hair. It felt heavier now, weighted with secrets I had never known. Why did she leave the society? Why did she hide? She fell in love, the veiled woman said simply. Your father was not a member. He was a merchant, honest and kind. She chose him over power, and she never regretted it. But she always knew the society might come calling. She left the records with me, in case you ever needed them. I stared at the ledger. There were dozens of pages, hundreds of names. My mother had been a force in her own right, a woman who had built an empire out of nothing and then walked away from it all. I had thought I knew her. I had thought she was just a gentle woman who died too young. But she had been so much more. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. First, you claim the land, the veiled woman said. The auction is in 7 days. The mansion will be sold, but the land beneath it, that land is yours by right. You have the contract, and you have the deed in the mine. Retrieve it, and the land is yours. Then you decide what to build. I nodded slowly. The auction was 7 days away. I had time. I had resources. I had the jade pin and the contract and the favor of the magistrate's wife. I could do this. But I also had enemies. Liu Yanshu was still alive, still scheming. And if the Golden Serpent Society knew about my mother, others might know too. Others who would want the land for themselves. The society will protect you, the veiled woman said, as if reading my thoughts. But you must be careful. Your uncle has friends in the northern territories, mercenaries, debt collectors, men who do not care about contracts or seals. He will try to escape. He will try to reclaim what he has lost. Let him try, I said. I will be ready. I left the pavilion with the ledger tucked into my sleeve. The sun was fully up now, the eastern road bustling with merchants and customers. I walked through the crowd, my head high, my mother's pin gleaming in the morning light. I was no longer just Liu Yun, the orphan niece. I was the serpent's daughter, and I had a legacy to claim. But the day was not over. As I approached the magistrate's yamen, I heard shouting, angry, desperate, familiar. I pushed through the crowd and saw my uncle standing at the yamen gates, his wrists still bound, his face wild with fury. He had been released. No, he was being dragged back in, his feet kicking up dust as 2 bailiffs hauled him toward the courtroom. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. What happened? A clerk turned to me, his face pale. He tried to bribe a guard. He offered gold, land, anything. The guard reported him. The magistrate is furious. Liu Yanshu saw me through the crowd. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his gaze, not fear, but calculation. He was planning something. Even now, even in chains, he was planning something. Liu Yun, he shouted. You think you have when you know nothing. That land you wanted is not yours. It never was. Your mother stole it from the society. She was a thief, just like you. The crowd went silent. I felt eyes on me, curious and suspicious. I kept my face still, my voice calm. My mother was no thief. And the deed is in the mine. I will prove it. He laughed, harsh and wild. You will find nothing in that mine but bones. Your mother hid more than deeds. She hid secrets, secrets that will destroy you. The bailiffs dragged him inside. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. I stood frozen at the yamen gates, my hands shaking. Bones. Secrets. What had my mother hidden in the mine, and why had she never told me? I turned and walked swiftly toward the southern hills, toward the jade mine that had been part of my dowry. I had not been there since I was a child, and I had never known the mine held more than jade. The path was steep, winding through scrubland and rocky outcroppings. The sun was high by the time I reached the entrance, a dark crack in the hillside flanked by crumbling wooden supports. I lit a lantern and stepped inside. The mine was cool and damp, the walls glistening with moisture. I followed the main shaft, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The jade had been mostly mined out, but there were still veins of green running through the rock, catching the lantern light like trapped stars. I did not know where to look. My mother had said the vault was in the mine, but she had not told me where. I walked deeper, past abandoned tools and rotting carts, past a small shrine to the mountain god, past a collapsed tunnel that had been sealed with stones. And then I saw it. A niche in the wall, hidden behind a loose slab of rock. I pushed the slab aside and reached into the niche. My fingers brushed against something cold and metal, a small iron box, crusted with rust. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a deed. The land beneath the Liu mansion, signed and sealed in my mother's name. And beneath the deed, wrapped in silk, was a small leather pouch. I opened the pouch and tipped its contents into my palm. A serpent fong, carved from jade. And a note, in my mother's handwriting, to my daughter, if she ever needs to remember who she is. I held the fong in my hand, and I felt a tremor run through me. My mother had not just left me deeds and contracts. She had left me a symbol, a key to a power I had not yet begun to understand. The jade serpent fong was not just jewelry. It was a token, a sign of authority within the Golden Serpent Society. I was not just the serpent's daughter. I was the serpent's heir. I tucked the deed and the fong into my sleeve and made my way back to the entrance. The sun was setting now, the hillsides painted in orange and red. I stood at the mine's mouth and looked down at the valley below. I could see the half-built mansion, its crimson pillars still standing, its glazed tiles still gleaming. I could see the eastern road, the silk shops, the golden serpent pavilion. And somewhere out there, my uncle was planning his next move. He had tried to bribe a guard. He had tried to poison the crowd. He had tried to make me doubt my mother. But I did not doubt her. I knew she had hidden the deed for a reason. I knew she had given me the pin for a reason. And now I knew she had left me the fang for a reason. I walked back down the hill, the jade serpent fong pressing against my palm. The veiled woman would want to know what I had found. The magistrate's wife would need to see the deed. And the auction was in 6 days. But as I reached the base of the hill, a rider galloped toward me, his horse lathered and panting. He reined in beside me and thrust a letter into my hand. From the magistrate, he said, his voice urgent. Liu Yanshu has escaped. I tore open the letter. The words blurred before my eyes. He bribed a different guard, one we did not know. He is gone. He took a horse and rode north. He is heading to the northern territories, to the mercenaries he owes money to. He will return with an army. I folded the letter and tucked it into my sleeve, alongside the deed and the fong. The sun was gone now, the sky darkening. I looked north, toward the mountains, and I felt the cold prickle of danger on my skin. Liu Yanshu had escaped. He would return. He would bring men who did not care about contracts or seals. He would burn the mansion, destroy the shops, and kill anyone who stood in his way. But I had the deed. I had the Fong. I had the society. And I had 6 days to prepare. I turned to the writer. Tell the magistrate to double the guards. Tell the veiled woman to gather the society. And tell the merchants to arm their workers. The writer nodded and galloped away. I stood alone in the dark, the jade pin cold against my scalp, the serpent Fong warm in my palm. The reckoning was coming. And this time, I would not wait for it to find me. I would ride north and meet it head-on. I did not ride north that night. I stood at the base of the southern hills, the jade serpent Fong burning in my palm, and I forced myself to think. Lu Yenshu had a horse and a head start. He knew the northern territories better than I did. He had mercenary contacts I had never met. If I chased him blindly, I would walk into whatever trap he set. I had spent 18 years in my first life being reactive, waiting for blows, dodging fists, surviving on scraps. This time, I would be the one who laid the ground. I turned back toward the eastern road. The shops were dark, the streets empty, but the golden serpent pavilion glowed with lamplight. I pushed open the door and found the veiled woman waiting, her ledger open, a map spread across her desk. I heard, she said before I could speak. Your uncle escaped. He is riding north to the mercenary plains. He has 3 days of hard riding ahead of him, maybe 4 if he stops to rest his horse. We have 6 days until the auction. Then I have 6 days to catch him, I said. She shook her head. You have 6 days to prepare. Catching him in open country is suicide. He knows the terrain, you do not. He has allies, you have a society that is only just beginning to trust you. You need a different strategy. I set the jade Fong on her desk. She stared at it, her veil rippling as she drew a sharp breath. Where did you find that in the mine? With the deed. My mother left it for me. She reached out and touched the fang with trembling fingers. She never told me she kept this. She said she had given it back to the society when she retired. But she kept it. She kept it for you. She looked up and, even through the veil, I could feel the weight of her gaze. Do you know what this means? It means I am the serpent's heir, I said. It means you can command the society's enforcers, she said. There are 12 of them, scattered across the prefecture. They are fighters, spies, assassins. They have not taken orders from anyone since your mother left. But they will take orders from the bearer of the Fong. I picked up the Fong and slipped it into my sleeve. Then call them. Gather them here. I need every one of them in this city by tomorrow night. She nodded and reached for a stack of scrolls. I watched her write, her brush moving fast and sure. I turned to the map spread across her desk and studied the northern territories. The mercenary plains were a lawless stretch of grassland, dotted with camps and fortresses. Mercenaries sold their swords to the highest bidder, and Lu Yenshu had spent years cultivating debts and favors there. He would not just hire one army, he would hire several, each one loyal to his coin. But I had a different kind of currency. I left the pavilion and walked to the magistrate's yamen. The guards recognized me now. They stepped aside without a word. The magistrate's wife met me in the courtyard, her face pale in the lantern light. Your husband will not be happy with what I am about to ask, I said. I do not care about my husband's happiness, she said. Tell me what you need. I told her. I needed the auction moved up. I needed the mansion stripped and sold in 3 days, not 7. I needed the proceeds funneled into a fund I could control, a war chest to hire my own mercenaries. I needed her to sign the order as the magistrate's proxy, using the seal of her office. She hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded and disappeared into the yamen. I waited in the courtyard, the jade Fong cold against my wrist. The night was quiet, but I could feel the city holding its breath, waiting for my uncle's return, waiting for the bloodshed to come. By dawn, the order was signed. By noon, the auction was announced. By sunset, the merchants had gathered to bid on my uncle's crimson pillars and glazed tiles. I stood at the edge of the square, watching the crowd swell, and I felt the first flicker of hope. But the enforcers had not arrived yet. And I had only 2 days left before Lu Yenshu reached the mercenary plains. I was sitting in the pavilion that evening, the ledger open in my lap, when the door swung open and a man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and he carried a sword so worn its scabbard was held together by leather strips. His face was scarred, a long line from his brow to his jaw, pale and jagged in the lamplight. He did not bow. He did not speak. He simply looked at me, then at the fang on the desk, and waited. "You're the first," I said. "I am the Shadow Blade," he said. His voice was rough, like stone grinding against stone. "I served your mother for 10 years. I will serve you for the Fong." I slid the Fong across the desk. He picked it up, turned it over in his calloused palm, and handed it back. "I do not need to hold it. I just need to see it." "Then sit," I said. "We have much to discuss." He sat. The night wore on, and one by one, the enforcers arrived. A woman with gray-streaked hair and a bow strapped across her back. A young man with quick eyes and quicker hands, a pair of daggers tucked into his boots. A grizzled old soldier who limped but whose grip on his spear was rock-steady. By midnight, all 12 had gathered in the pavilion, filling the small room with their silent presence. I stood before them, the Fong in my hand, the contract in my sleeve. I had planned my words carefully, but when I opened my mouth, the words came from somewhere deeper, from the cold alley where I died, from the years of hunger and fear, from the rage that had kept me alive. "Lu Yenshu stole my mother's dowry," I said. "He built his mansion on her land. He tried to deny it. I proved him wrong. Now he has escaped, and he is riding north to raise an army. He will come back to burn the city, to kill everyone who stood against him, and to take back everything I took from him." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across their faces. "You served my mother. You know what kind of woman she was. She did not run from fights. She did not hide. She faced her enemies head-on, and she won. I am her daughter. I have her blood, her name, and her Fong. I will not run either." The Shadow Blade stood. "Tell us what you need." I unfurled the map across the desk. "Lu Yenshu will take the northern pass. It is the fastest route to the mercenary plains, but it is also the most narrow. If we can block it, we can trap him before he reaches the mercenaries. And if he does reach them," the archer asked. "Then we fight him in the plains," I said. "But I will not let him get that far. We ride at dawn. We take the southern route, the longer road, and we reach the pass before he does. We dig in, we fortify, and we wait. He will come to us, and when he does, we take him." The old soldier nodded slowly. "The pass is defensible, but we are 12. He will have hired men, maybe 50, maybe more. 12 is enough," I said. "I am not going to meet him in open battle. I am going to make him an offer he cannot refuse." The veiled woman, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "What offer?" I pulled the deed from my sleeve and laid it on the map. "The land beneath the mansion. It is mine, but he does not know that I have the deed. He still thinks the land is worthless, a patch of dirt he can sell to the northern lord. I am going to let him think he can still have it, if he comes to the pass alone and unarmed." "You are going to offer him a trap," the Shadow Blade said. "I am going to offer him a choice," I said. "He can come alone, sign a confession, and walk away with nothing but his life. Or he can bring his army, and I will burn the deed in front of him. He will never touch the land again." The enforcers exchanged glances. The archer was the first to smile, a grim, thin smile that did not reach her eyes. "He will not come alone. He will bring his men and pretend to surrender. And then he will cut your throat." "Then I will cut his first," I said. We rode at dawn. The southern route was long and winding, through villages and rice paddies, past shrines and graveyards. I rode at the head of the column, my mother's jade pin in my hair, the serpent Fong tucked into my belt. The enforcers flanked me, silent and watchful. The veiled woman had stayed behind to coordinate the city's defenses, but she had given me a pouch of coins and a promise. If we failed, she would burn the pavilion and disappear. I did not intend to fail. By the second night, we reached the northern pass. It was as I remembered from my first life, a narrow gorge flanked by steep cliffs, the road barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast. At its narrowest point, it was a bottleneck, a killing ground. I dismounted and climbed the cliff face, the enforcers following behind me. We set up watch posts on both sides, hidden among the rocks and scrub. The shadow blades scouted ahead and returned at midnight. He is 2 days behind us. He has 40 men with him, maybe more. They are traveling fast, not stopping to rest. I nodded. Then we have 1 day to prepare. We worked through the night. We rolled boulders to the edge of the cliff, ready to drop them on the road below. We set tripwires and pit traps, covered with leaves and loose dirt. The archer found a perch high on the left cliff, her bow within easy reach. The young man with the daggers vanished into the shadows, his role to flank and harry. I sat at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the narrow road below. The moon was full, casting silver light across the gorge. I had been here before, in a different life, running from my husband's beatings, hiding in the caves that dotted the cliffs. I had known the pass was defensible. I had known it was a place where armies died. But I had never imagined I would be the one doing the defending. The next day came and went. The sun rose, climbed high, and began to fall. The enforcers waited, still and silent, their eyes fixed on the road below. I waited with them, my heart pounding in my chest. At dusk, we heard them. The thud of hooves, the clank of armor, the low murmur of voices. I peered over the edge and saw them, Lu Yenshu at the head of a column of rough-looking men, their faces scarred and hard. He was riding a new horse, a black stallion that pranced and tossed its head. He wore armor, too, a battered cuirass that did not fit properly. He was scared. I could see it in the tight set of his shoulders, the way he kept glancing back at his men. He had hired an army, but he did not trust them. He knew they would turn on him the moment his gold ran out. I climbed down from the cliff and stepped onto the road, alone, unarmed except for the thong in my belt and the deed in my sleeve. The enforcers watched from above, their weapons ready. I walked toward my uncle, my steps steady, my voice calm. Lu Yenshu. He reined in his horse. His eyes widened when he saw me, then narrowed with suspicion. You came alone. Not alone, I said. But I came to talk. That is all. He laughed, harsh and bitter. Talk? You humiliated me. You took my mansion, my land, my name. And now you want to talk? I want to give you a choice, I said. I pulled the deed from my sleeve and held it up. This is the deed to the land beneath your mansion. The land you built on, the land you thought was yours. It was my mother's. She bought it before she married. I found the deed in the jade mine, where she hid it. His face went pale. You found it. I found it, I said. And I am offering it to you. Not for gold, not for power. For a confession. You will ride back to the city with me. You will stand in the yamen and confess, in writing, that you stole my mother's dowry, that you tried to defraud me, that you bribed guards and escaped custody. You will sign it, seal it, and swear to never return to the southern prefecture. Do that, and the deed is yours. He stared at the deed, his mouth working. I could see the greed in his eyes, the desperate hunger for something to salvage. But I could also see the calculation, the knowledge that his men were watching, that he could not afford to look weak. And if I refuse, he asked. I pulled out a flint and steel. Then I burn it. Right here, in front of you. The land becomes worthless, because no one can claim it without the deed. Your mansion stays in ruins. You have nothing. His hand went to his sword. I did not flinch. I struck the flint, and a spark flew, catching the corner of the deed. The paper began to smoke. Or wait, he shouted. Wait, I will do it. I will sign the confession. Just put out the flame. I blew out the fire. The deed was singed but intact. I folded it and tucked it back into my sleeve. Then dismount. Your men stay here. You come with me. He climbed down from his horse, his hands trembling. His men watched, their faces unreadable. I led him toward the cliff, toward the narrow path that climbed to the top. The enforcers emerged from the shadows, surrounding him, their weapons drawn. Where are you taking me? He demanded. To the top of the cliff, I said. To sign your confession in the moonlight. If your men see you walking down from the pass, they will know you have surrendered. They will not follow you. They will scatter. He walked in silence, his head low. I climbed behind him, the enforcers flanking us both. The path was steep, the rocks loose underfoot. I could feel the thong pressing against my hip, a reminder of who I was and what I had become. When we reached the top, I spread the confession paper on a flat rock and handed him a brush. He took it, his hand shaking, and began to write. I read each word as he wrote it, the admission of fraud, the admission of bribery, the admission of escape. When he finished, he pressed his seal to the bottom. I picked up the paper and folded it. Thank you, Uncle. You are still a viper, he spat. You have the deed. You have the confession. What more do you want? I smiled, and for the first time, I let him see the cold fury that had been burning in me since I woke with the jade pin in my hand. I want you to look down. He turned. I shoved him toward the edge of the cliff. He stumbled, his feet slipping on the loose gravel. He caught himself, his hands gripping the rock, his face twisted with terror. I could push you, I said. I could watch you fall and splatter on the road below. Your men would see you die, and they would run. I would be rid of you forever. He stared at me, his eyes wide. You would not. I would, I said. But I am not going to. Because I want you to live. I want you to walk down from this mountain, stripped of your armor, your gold, your men. I want you to ride back to the city and watch your mansion be sold, piece by piece. I want you to know that every coin I count was once yours, and that you gave it all to me because you were too greedy to refuse a contract. I stepped back and extended my hand to help him up. He took it, his grip weak and clammy. I pulled him to his feet and turned to the enforcers. Take him back to the city. Put him in the deepest cell in the yamen. And if he tries to escape again, cut off his feet. The shadow blade nodded. The enforcers dragged my uncle down the path, his protests fading into the night. I stood alone on the cliff, the singed deed in my sleeve, the confession in my hand. The moon was high, the path quiet. I had won. I had trapped him, cornered him, broken him. I had forced him to confess, sign, and surrender. But as I stood there, a cold wind swept through the gorge, and I heard a voice, a soft, familiar, impossible. My mother's voice, whispering in my ear, beware the serpent's bite. It always comes in pairs. I spun around. The cliff was empty. The enforcers had gone. I was alone. I touched the jade pin in my hair. It was cold again, cold as death. And as I looked down at the road below, I saw something I had not noticed before, a shadow moving between the rocks, a figure in black robes, watching me from the darkness. The serpent's bite. A second reckoning. I had stopped Liu Yanshu. But I had not stopped the veiled woman. I had not stopped the society. I had not stopped my mother's past. And the shadow in the rocks was proof that my fight was only beginning. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the cliff edge, the jade fang in my palm, and I watched the shadow in the rocks until dawn bled across the sky. It did not move. It simply waited, a patient silhouette against the gray stone, and I knew with a cold certainty that it was not going to attack. It was going to watch. It was going to learn. And then it was going to strike. When the sun fully rose, the shadow was gone. I climbed down from the cliff and rode back to the city alone. The enforcers had taken my uncle to the yamen, and the streets were already buzzing with the news. Liu Yanshu had been recaptured. He had confessed. He would rot in a cell for the rest of his miserable life. The merchants cheered. The workers celebrated. The magistrate's wife met me at the gate and pressed a cup of warm tea into my hands. You did it, she said. You actually did it. I drank the tea. It was bitter, but it steadied my hands. I did not do it alone. The enforcers helped. The society helped. You helped. She smiled, but her eyes were troubled. Your uncle is in the deepest cell. He is screaming about the serpent. He says the veiled woman sent you, that you are a puppet. He says there is a second serpent, one that will devour you. I set down the cup. He is lying. He is trying to sow doubt. Perhaps, she said. But the shadow in the rocks, the one you mentioned to the guards, they found footprints. Small footprints, like a woman's. They led to the pavilion. I felt the jade pin grow cold against my scalp. The veiled woman had never left the city. She had been coordinating the defenses, gathering information, waiting for my return. But if the footprints led to the pavilion, then she had left. Or someone had wanted me to think she had left. I walked to the Golden Serpent Pavilion. The door was unlocked, the interior dark. The ledger was still on the desk, the map still spread across the surface. But the veiled woman's veil was draped over her chair, empty and limp. I picked it up and held it to my face. It smelled of incense and rain. I searched the pavilion from top to bottom. The upper floors were empty, the rooms bare. The basement was locked, but I found the key hanging on a hook behind the desk. I opened the door and descended the narrow stairs. The basement was cold and damp, lit by a single oil lamp. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls and ledgers. But in the center of the room, there was a table. And on the table, there was a letter. I picked it up. The script was my mother's. To my daughter, if you are reading this, then I have failed you. The society is not what it seems. The veiled woman is not who she claims. I left the fung for you, but I also left a warning. The serpent has two heads. One rules the day, the other rules the night. You have met the day. The night is coming for you. I read the letter 3 times. My mother had known. She had known that the veiled woman was not the true leader of the society. She had known that there was another head, one that operated in the shadows, one that had been waiting for me to claim the fong and step into the light. I tucked the letter into my sleeve and climbed back up the stairs. The pavilion was silent, but I felt eyes on me, the same patient, watchful gaze I had felt on the cliff. I did not turn around. I simply walked to the door and stepped out into the street. The eastern road was crowded. Merchants hawked their wares, children ran between the stalls, and the smells of tea and frying oil filled the air. I walked through the crowd, my head high, and I let myself disappear among the masses. I needed to think. I needed to plan. And I needed to find out who the second serpent was. The magistrate's wife found me at the silk shop that evening. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by ledgers and scrolls, trying to piece together my mother's life. The woman stood in the doorway, her face pale and her hands trembling. "There is a woman at the yamen," she said. "She claims to be from the Northern Territories. She says she has information about your uncle, about his debts, his allies, his plans. She will only speak to you." I rose to my feet. My mother's letter was tucked into my sleeve, the jade fong warm in my palm. The second serpent was making its move. The woman was sitting in the magistrate's private chamber, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was older, with gray-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore simple robes, but her boots were fine leather, and her belt was studded with silver. "Lu Yun," she said, rising to greet me. "I am Lady Zhao. I was your mother's friend many years ago. I have come to warn you." "Warn me about what?" She glanced at the magistrate's wife, who nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind her. Lady Zhao stepped closer, her voice low. "The Golden Serpent Society has a second leader. She is called the Night Serpent. She has been waiting for someone to claim the fong, because the fong is the only thing that can stop her. Your mother knew this. That is why she left it for you." I touched the fong through my sleeve. "Why would she leave it for me if it was so dangerous?" "Because you are the only one who can wield it," Lady Zhao said. "The fong is not just a symbol. It is a key to a vault beneath the jade mine. Inside that vault is a contract, a binding agreement that limits the Night Serpent's power. If she gets her hands on it, she will destroy it. And then she will be unstoppable." I felt the pieces click into place. The shadow in the rocks. The empty pavilion. The letter from my mother. It was all connected. "Who is the Night Serpent?" I asked. Lady Zhao hesitated. "She is the woman you know as the Veiled Woman's sister. They were both trained by your mother. The Veiled Woman was the loyal one. The Night Serpent was the ambitious one. When your mother retired, she left the Veiled Woman in charge, but the Night Serpent refused to accept it. She has been building her own network, her own army, her own plans. And now that you have the fong, she will come for you." I closed my eyes. The Veiled Woman had sent me to the mine. She had told me about my mother. She had given me the ledger and the map. Had she been helping me, or had she been using me to draw out her sister? "I need to go back to the mine," I said. "I need to find that vault." Lady Zhao nodded. "I will come with you. But we must leave now. The Night Serpent knows you're in the city. She will be watching." We left through the back gate of the yamen, slipping into the alleys and side streets. Lady Zhao moved with the ease of someone who had spent her life in shadows. She led me through the maze of the city, past the sleeping shops and the silent temples, until we reached the southern hills. The mine was dark when we entered. I lit a lantern and led the way through the tunnels, past the collapsed shaft and the small shrine to the mountain god. The vault was hidden behind a false wall, sealed with a lock that required 2 keys, the jade pin and the serpent fong. I held both in my hands. The pin was cold, the fong warm. I pressed them into the lock, and the wall slid open with a grinding sound. Inside the vault, there was a single chest. I opened it. Inside, there were contracts, dozens of them, bound in leather and sealed with wax. But at the top, there was a single scroll, tied with a crimson ribbon. I unrolled it. The script was my mother's, but it was not written in her usual hand. It was hasty, desperate, the characters crowded and uneven. To whoever finds this, I have bound the night serpent with an oath. She cannot harm any bearer of the fong. But if she finds this contract, she will burn it, and the oath will be broken. Do not let her find it. Burn it yourself, if you must. But do not let her have it. I stared at the contract. It was written on thick parchment, sealed with my mother's personal stamp. I could feel the weight of it in my hands, the power it held. I heard a sound behind me. I spun around, the lantern swinging. Lady Zhao was gone. The tunnel was empty. But I could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I grabbed the contract and shoved it into my sleeve. I blew out the lantern and pressed myself against the wall. The darkness was absolute, thick as velvet. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped. A voice, soft and familiar, echoed through the tunnel. You found it. I knew you would. The veiled woman stepped out of the darkness. She was not wearing her veil. Her face was beautiful, sharp-featured, with eyes that gleamed like polished stone. She held a lantern in one hand and a dagger in the other. You, I breathed. Me, she said. I am not the veiled woman. She was my sister. I killed her 2 days ago after you left for the pass. I took her place. I watched you. I followed you. And now I have you. I backed away, my hands outstretched. You cannot hurt me. The oath binds you. She laughed, a cold, brittle sound. The oath binds me only as long as the contract exists. And you are holding it. Do you think I will let you keep it? I clutched the scroll to my chest. I will burn it. I will burn it right now. Then burn it, she said, stepping closer. Burn it, and the oath is gone. I can kill you without a second thought. Or you can give it to me, and I will let you live. You can walk away, run away, disappear. I do not care. I just want the contract. I looked at her. I looked at the dagger in her hand. And I made a choice. I reached for my flint and steel. I struck it once, twice. The spark caught the corner of the parchment. The flame licked the edge, spreading fast. No, she screamed. She lunged at me, but I dropped the burning scroll and stepped back. The fire caught the dry parchment, curling it, consuming it. The contract turned to ash in seconds, crumbling on the stone floor. The night serpent stopped. She stared at the ash, her face frozen in disbelief. Then she turned to me, and her eyes were blazing. You fool, she whispered. You have just freed me. I did not flinch. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out my mother's jade pin. I held it up, point first, like a dagger of my own. You are free, I said. But so am I. I am the bearer of the fong. I am the serpent's heir. And I have a dozen enforcers waiting outside this mine. She laughed again, but there was a tremor in her voice. The enforcers, they are loyal to the fong, not to you. They will follow whoever holds it. I smiled. It was not a kind smile. Then you should have taken it from me while you had the chance. I threw the jade pen at her feet. She looked down, confused. Then she looked up, and I saw the first flicker of fear in her eyes. I do not need the pin, I said. I do not need the fong. I do not need the contract. I have something you will never have. A city that trusts me, a magistrate who owes me, and a mother who loved me enough to leave me a warning. I stepped past her, toward the tunnel entrance. She did not move. She just stood there, staring at the ash on the floor. Leave this city, I said. Leave this prefecture. If I ever see you again, I will not negotiate. I will not bargain. I will have you arrested, tried, and executed for the murder of your sister. She said nothing. I walked out of the mine and into the moonlight. Lady Zhao was waiting outside. She had not left, she had simply stepped into the shadows to watch. She looked at me, her eyes searching. You burned it, she said. The contract. You burned it. I did, I said. Then she is free. I know, I said. But she is also afraid. She has nothing to hold over me now. No oath to bind me. No contract to threaten. She is just a woman with a knife and a grudge. I can handle that. I walked down the hill, the night air cool on my face. The city glowed in the distance, warm and alive. I had won. Not through contracts, not through oaths, but through the same thing my uncle had tried to use against me, the truth. I was not a victim. I was not a puppet. I was Lu Yun, the serpent's daughter, and I had just freed myself from every chain that had ever bound me. But as I walked through the city gates, a messenger rode up beside me, his horse lathered and panting. Lady Lu, he said, his voice urgent. The mercenaries. They are not disbanding. They are gathering at the northern pass. They say they have been hired by a woman in black robes, a woman who promised them the jade mine and the silk shops. I stopped walking. The night serpent had not fled. She had not surrendered. She had gone straight to the mercenaries, and she was coming for me. I turned to Lady Zhao. How many? 200, she said. Maybe more. I thought of the enforcers, the merchants, the magistrate's wife. I thought of the contracts in the vault, the deed in my sleeve, the jade fong in my belt. I thought of my mother, who had spent her life fighting shadows and serpents. I climbed onto a horse and rode toward the northern pass. The night serpent wanted a war. I would give her one. But this time, I would not fight with contracts and oaths. I would fight with steel and fire, with the city at my back and the rage in my heart. The second reckoning had arrived. And I was ready. I rode through the night with Lady Zhao at my side, and the jade fong pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The northern pass loomed ahead, dark and silent, but I knew it was not empty. 200 mercenaries waited in the gorge, hired by the night serpent, hungry for my blood and my mother's legacy. I had burned the contract. I had freed her from the oath. And now she was coming to take everything I had built. I did not ride alone for long. The enforcers found me before dawn, the shadow blade, the archer, the young man with the daggers, all 12 of them, their faces grim and their weapons drawn. They had heard the news. They had come to fight. You should have stayed in the city, I said to the shadow blade. He shook his head. We serve the fong. And the fong is with you. I pulled the jade serpent fong from my belt and held it up. The moonlight caught its surface and it glowed like a trapped ember. I am not asking you to serve me. I am asking you to stand with me. There is a difference. He did not answer. He simply rode beside me, silent and steady, and I knew he understood. By the time we reached the pass, the sun was rising. The gorge was choked with men, rough, scarred mercenaries in mismatched armor, their horses stamping and snorting. At their head sat the night serpent, astride a black mare, her robes fluttering in the morning wind. She had discarded the veiled woman's guise entirely. Her face was bare, her hair loose, and she wore a silver crown shaped like a coiled serpent. She saw me and smiled. Lu Yun. I knew you would come. I always come, I said. It is what I do. Behind me, the enforcers fanned out. Behind them, I heard the thunder of hooves, dozens of them, then hundreds. I turned and saw the city's merchants on horseback, their workers armed with pitchforks and scythes. The magistrate's wife rode at their head, her face pale but resolute. She had brought the entire eastern road with her, the weavers, the dyers, the shopkeepers, the women I had hired and trained. They had come to fight for the city, for their shops, for their lives. The night serpent's smile faltered. You brought a mob. I brought a city, I said. And a city is worth more than any army of hired blades. She laughed, but it was brittle. You think numbers matter? My mercenaries are trained killers. Your shopkeepers are farmers with sticks. Then let us see who bleeds first, I said. I did not wait for her to respond. I kicked my horse forward and charged into the gorge. The enforcers followed, a wedge of steel and fury. Behind us, the shopkeepers surged forward, their shouts echoing off the cliffs. The battle was chaos. The gorge was too narrow for the mercenaries to use their numbers effectively. They crowded together, their horses rearing and colliding. The enforcers carved through them like a knife through silk, their movements precise and brutal. I fought with the jade fang in one hand and a short sword in the other, cutting and thrusting, my mind sharp and clear. I saw the night serpent through the fray. She was not fighting. She was watching, her eyes fixed on me, her silver crown gleaming. She was waiting for me to tire, to stumble, to fall. And then she would strike. I fought my way toward her. The mercenaries tried to block me, but the enforcers cleared the path. The shopkeepers fought with a ferocity that surprised even me, the weavers with their loom shuttles, the dyers with their boiling vats, the women I had trained with their sharpened scissors. They had been cheated and beaten and ignored their whole lives. They were not fighting for me. They were fighting for themselves. I reached the night serpent. She dismounted and drew her own blade, a thin, curved sword that hissed as it cut the air. "You should have stayed in the city," she said. "You should have let me have the mine." "I should have done a lot of things," I said. "But I am done with should have." We clashed. Her sword was faster, but my fang was harder. I parried and thrust, my movements fueled by 18 years of rage and 1 lifetime of loss. She was good, better than me, perhaps, but she was not fighting with her whole heart. She was fighting for power, for control, for a crown that had never been hers. I was fighting for my mother's memory, for the women I had sworn to protect, for the girl who had died in a cold alley with nothing but hunger and fury. I feinted left, and she took the bait. I drove the fang into her side, between the plates of her armor. She gasped, stumbling back, her sword falling from her hand. The silver crown tipped and rolled across the ground. I stood over her, breathing hard, the fang slick with her blood. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, and for a moment I saw the same fear I had seen in Lianshu's eyes. "Kill me," she whispered. "Do it. I would kill you." I looked at her. I looked at the mercenaries, who had stopped fighting to watch. I looked at the shopkeepers, their faces streaked with sweat and blood. I looked at the enforcers, waiting for my command. I knelt down beside her and pulled the fang from her side. She gasped, her hands pressing against the wound. "No," I said. "I am not going to kill you. I am going to let you live. I am going to let you heal, and then I am going to put you on a horse and send you north, far north, where no one knows your name or your face. You will live. You will watch from a distance as I rebuild the city, reclaim the mine, and build a legacy that will outlast both of us." She stared at me, her mouth open. "You are a fool. I will come back. Then I will be ready," I said. "I will always be ready. Because I have a city that trusts me, a society that serves me, and a mother who taught me that mercy is not weakness. It is the greatest strength there is." I stood and walked away. The enforcers formed a circle around her, preventing the mercenaries from approaching. I climbed onto my horse and rode to the head of the gorge, where the city's people had gathered. The battle was over. The mercenaries, leaderless and demoralized, had thrown down their weapons. The shopkeepers were cheering, their voices raw and hoarse. The enforcers were tending to the wounded, binding cuts and setting broken bones. I looked at the pass, at the bodies scattered across the stone, and I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, something warm and steady. Peace. The night serpent was taken to the city, her wound treated by the magistrate's own physician. I did not visit her. I did not gloat. I simply made sure she was fed and sheltered, and then I sent her north with a horse and a pouch of silver. It was, I thought, more than she had ever given anyone. The weeks that followed were a blur of rebuilding. The mansion was sold, not to a northern lord, but to the city itself, which turned it into a school for orphans. The silk shops reopened, their looms clattering from dawn to dusk. The jade mine became a collective, its profits shared among the miners and their families. I moved into my mother's old house, a small courtyard tucked behind the eastern road. I kept her jade pin in my hair every day and the thong on a chain around my neck. I wore them not as trophies, but as reminders of where I had come from and what I had overcome. The veiled woman's death was mourned quietly. I had her body retrieved from the pavilion's basement and buried in the southern hills, beside a shrine to the mountain god. I did not know if she had been a friend or a tool, but I knew she had been loyal to my mother, and that was enough. Lady Zhao stayed in the city. She became my advisor, my confidant, my steady hand in the chaos. She taught me the trade routes, the political alliances, the hidden currents that ran beneath the surface of the prefecture. She was not my mother, but she was the closest thing I had to one evening. As I sat in the courtyard, the magistrate's wife came to visit. She brought tea and cakes, and she sat across from me, her face soft in the lantern light. "You have done well," she said. "The city is thriving. The people trust you." "I trust them," I said. "That is the difference." She nodded. "Your uncle is still in his cell. He has stopped screaming. He just sits there, staring at the wall. The guards say he has given up." I drank my tea. Good. Let him sit. Let him stare. He has earned his silence. "And the night serpent?" she asked. "Do you think she will return?" I set down my cup. "I do not know. But if she does, I will face her. I have faced worse." She studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, a genuine smile, warm and unguarded. "You are not the same girl who walked into my husband's yamen with a contract and a desperate plan. You are something else entirely." I touched the fong at my throat. "I am what my mother made me. And what I made myself." She left as the moon rose. I sat alone in the courtyard, the jade pin cool against my scalp, and I thought about the journey I had taken. I had died in a cold alley, clutching a rotting cabbage. I had been beaten and broken and left for dead. I had been reborn with nothing but a pin and a memory dot, and I had rebuilt everything. Not just my dowry, not just my inheritance, but myself. I had forced my uncle to repay every coin, not because I needed the gold, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was not a victim. I had faced the night serpent and shown her mercy, not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to choose differently. I had broken the cycle. I had stopped the violence. I had given others the same second chance I had been given. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the singed deed, the confession, the contracts I had kept from the vault. I spread them across the stone table and read them one by one. They were proof of my battles, my victories, my scars. But they were also weights. They were reminders of the past, chains that bound me to the woman I had been. I picked up the confession, my uncle's trembling words, his seal, his admission of fraud, and I held it over the lantern flame. It caught fire. I watched it burn, the paper curling and blackening, the ink dissolving into ash. I did the same with the deed, the contracts, the old ledgers. I let them all burn one by one until there was nothing left but ash and smoke. I did not need them anymore. I had the truth in my heart, and that was enough. I stood and walked to the edge of the courtyard. The city glowed below me, warm and alive, full of people who trusted me and believed in me. I had built this. I had fought for this. I had bled for this. And I would keep fighting. Not for revenge, not for gold, but for the woman I had become. The woman who had died and been reborn. The woman who had forced every coin to be repaid, and then repaid it all in kindness. I touched the jade pin in my hair. I touched the fong at my throat. I closed my eyes, and I felt my mother's presence beside me, not a ghost, not a whisper, but a memory, warm and steady. "Thank you," I said. "For the pin. For the fong. For the second chance." The wind stirred the ash across the courtyard. I opened my eyes, and I smiled. I was Lu Yun. I was the serpent's daughter. And my story was just beginning.